10th of April. Outsiders don't know whether there's going to be a first Moondog.
I think it's about, and I think the Prime Minister and other ministers are very clear at the moment about transitioning the economy to the new economy. And I think that picks up your point, Zoe, about the fact that some of the industries that we currently rely on as a country may well not exist in 20 years. We've watched people need to stop thinking that what we have now is what we need. What we actually need is actually to continue change. Change is an ongoing process in an economy and in a society. How we manage that changes the pace. And I think the fact that the Prime Minister is actually talking about it, thinking about it, we shall see some things come out.
Change in continuity, which is hilarious.
On that
Not the message I got
right.
from Greg Hunt in Paris. I mean, I was at one of the sessions in Paris where Greg Hunt said, oh, look, the future is seagrass and carbon capture. And, it's been a complete lack of forward thinking on the actual industrial challenges of climate change.
All right, let's move on from there now to the entertainment news. What side is entertainment now so much bigger? There's a controversy around Leland Chin and Waleed Ali being nominated over the Gold Logies and all the hysteria that's issued. SBS Feed took matters into their own hands.
Now, I don't know about you, but I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland Chin.
I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland.
I stand with Leland. Well, I stand with Waleed, but I don't know what all the fuss is about. Now leave me alone.
So really quickly, we're running out of time. Will white people ever win an award again if they give it to Waleed now? Is it now our
No,
turn?
it will be the end of the world. It will be. I think it's a travesty. I think it's disgusting. I think we should all be really upset. I
Right,
think
yeah.
much more than Wayala.
Van, this is two people in the whole panel. People are flipping out. What happens when there's actual diversity involved?
I know. Well, the quote that's been going around the internet is that if you were privileged, equality looks like oppression. And don't we have a lot of screaming, hysterical white people? And the only thing that disappoints me about Waleed and Leland Chin both being in that finalist group for the Gold Logie is my vote is split. And this is the problem. Like, we might see a triumph of a non-entity merely because Australia can't decide between the two of them.
Catherine, really quickly, last question to you, which is who do you want to see win it?
I am just so excited by meeting Van as the first person I've ever met who's voted for a Logie.
I know that's true. We don't know who votes for this thing. It's a mystery, and
It's
the
in
results.
TV Week magazine. I can't believe you people don't know this.
I didn't know they
TV
still
magazine?
published it.
This is radio. We're radio people right here. No, is this our version of the diversity debate around the Academy Awards was having? Is this the best we can offer in that same kind of discussion?
I think it is. I mean, I think the thing that the reason it's sort of blown up is because of that ridiculous article in the Telegraph. Like, I've never read a piece of rubbish like that. It was crazy, and the fact
Sources might say.
people have suggested the fact that that's actually that someone would think that and then publish it's just crazy.
Well,
so I think it's a real issue.
That's as good a place as any to wrap up today's Outsiders. With me have been Catherine McGovern, Senior Associate at the Agenda Group, Van Badham, Guardian Australia columnist, writer and activist, and Zoe Coombs-Marr, critically acclaimed comedian. I'm Sammy Shah filling in for Jonathan Green, and you're listening to Sunday Extra here on RN. And that's as good.
Okay, and you're looking at Dizzy, the disabled kangaroo, who showed up this morning with a re-injury to her lacerated right foot. Those of you who were paying really close attention may have noticed that she came up and approached the veranda's edge and ate a couple of pieces of bread and had her wound re-irrigated, and this time she knew what it was on about, so she didn't hop away while the irrigation was happening. She didn't react badly to it. She knows the drill. She's been treated here before for the same injury. Don't know how much success we're going to have with this one because it's bigger than it was before. I have been around and looked at all of my sharp pieces of corrugated iron that are lying around on the ground. None of them have got blood or hair or any indications on them of having caused it, so I'm fairly confident that she's done it somewhere else. I don't really know what she does. Trying to get through a fence, perhaps, catching it on a piece of turned over fence wire. But anyway, the week that was. Two Australian women on child rescue missions to the muddled east came unglued. There was the grandma who went over there to try and retrieve her grandchildren and a great-grand baby because her daughter had decided to marry a jihadist and run away to Syria with him, and then he was reputedly killed in a drone strike. But now maybe he's not necessarily quite so dead in drones at all. But anyway, she went to hospital for something like appendicitis or septicemia or something like that. But because she wasn't a man and because she wasn't a freedom fighter and because it's part of the caliphate and they're under attack, medical resources are limited. Therefore, she got left to die, which she did. So the grandmother of this, I don't know, three or five children, something like that. There's one kid that was 14 and got married off and has since had a kid of her own. So it's a bit complicated. Granny says that all of them want to come back. And her problem was that the media got wind of the fact that she was in Turkey and she was trying to set up a rescue mission. And then it all became too dangerous to go near the kids because if it's on Facebook in Australia, then the people who are looking at ISIL's Facebook page in Syria, they know all about it. So that granny had to come home in tears and she was blaming the media. And we no sooner got used to the idea that had all gone wrong when a new bunch of news came out from Lebanon that an Australian woman called Sally Faulkner has been arrested while trying to abduct her own children on the streets. And the Channel 9 news crew who was filming it and who paid the abduction agency to kidnap her children, the Channel 9 news crew is also in custody in Lebanon with charges pending. And of course, the children's father has been interviewed to say, well, they're Lebanese citizens in Lebanon, and as far as he's concerned, they're going to stay in Lebanon. His story is that he tried several times to live in Australia, but his income stream is in Lebanon, and it just didn't work out in Australia. So once again, some clever little Australian citizen has decided to go broody with somebody who lives somewhere else entirely. Having gone broody, they then schism because they didn't actually get along with each other as well as they thought they did. They sort of married each other's idea of who they thought the other one was. And then the person from somewhere else entirely decides they're going to go back home where they feel like they might fit in a bit better. And both of them have visions that the kids are going to stay in the one country with them. Like mummy, if mummy's an Australian, she wants the kids with her. If daddy's a Middle Easterner, he wants the kids with him. And you can kind of swap it around both ways. But yeah, I've got a friend who did that trick, and she spent years and years and years trying to get in contact with her kid that was being held. I think it was in Lebanon. And eventually she didn't get to talk to the kid till the kid was sort of late teenager, and by that stage the kid had grown up in Lebanon and was pretty happy with things. It's the perils of the internationally mobile world. It's the downside of the global village. It's just like the idea that once upon a time, if there was a virulent influenza outbreak in one country, then any ship coming from that country would have to stand 40 days quarantine when it showed up. You can't do that with jumbo jets because the airlines will go broke if you make their customers spend either a quarantine period at the airport before you let them, with a clean bill of health, get on a plane to go anywhere else in the world. That would work. Or make them arrive and keep them on an island in the middle of the harbour for 40 days to prove that they haven't got a contagious disease, which would also work. And, well, it sort of looks as if the foresters decided to fight back with a vengeance. I mean, they reckon 67,000 people died from the Ebola outbreak last year. That was just one colony of bats in Africa decided that it was going to strike a blow for the forest. Didn't pull any punches, did it? Now you've got this Zika virus, which once upon a time came from the Zika forest in Ethiopia, and it's spent 40 or 50 years working its way slowly across Asia and Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, and 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it was on Easter Island, and people just got the sniffles and noted that there's this virus that used to be there and now it's here, and nothing else was happening. people have been asking the Brazilians to leave the bloody rainforest alone for an awfully long time. Lungs of the planet, as they get called. And you know, what have we got happening? We've got clear felling for cattle grazing to make McDonald's hamburgers cheaper all over the world. And we've got degradation of the landscape. The forest is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And all of a sudden, this African virus turns up in South America and has a bit of a talk to the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And there's an evolutionary mutation which causes that otherwise harmless virus to suddenly have an affinity for fetal neurological tissue. And maybe 75% of all births in Brazil are either stillbirths or microcephalics, or the kid's got other major birth deformities and isn't going to live. Certainly not ever going to become a productive taxpayer or, you know, obedient soldier in the military or miner in the hills, or, you know, somebody chopping down trees with a chainsaw from the Brazilian still factory. They have a still factory in Brazil. They make the parts in Germany and ship them to Brazil, and the Brazilians assemble their own chainsaws for chopping down the forest because they've already chopped them down in Germany, haven't they? So yeah, that's this interesting little virus that then the Australian Olympics teams unveiled its new uniform, where the women are wearing skirts at knee length and the men are wearing short longs or long shorts at the same hemline, so they can go and run around and dangle their legs in front of all the Zika-bearing mosquitoes. But it's also sexually transmitted, and you know, it's not as if there's any reputation for sexual promiscuity and licentiousness around the Olympic Village, is it? And when the strapping young athletes come back to their home countries, it's not as if they're likely to shag everybody they were ever friends with and flirted with in their previous lives either. There's no sort of correlation between athleticism and sexual activity. Footballers and cheerleaders and gangbangs aside, is there? Yeah, why would that be a worry? So I think a lot of economic projections based on population growth might be going to go right out the bloody window after the Olympics in the diaspora of Zika virus. I mean, there's already people in Australia whose partners have been in Colombia and they've come home and suddenly the partners picked up Zika virus, and the local council's spraying pesticides within 250 metres of their house. I wonder how the frogs that would otherwise live in the waterholes and eat the mosquito larvae are going to get on when all the waterholes are laced with pesticide and insecticide. Could be the final finish for some of those frogs that are having a hard time staying alive, mightn't it? So yeah, that was the week that was, and of course Malcolm Turnbull is no longer popular. Everybody's noticed that he's not just implementing Tony Abbott's policies, he's in a lot of ways kind of worse. The Liberal government's privatised replacement for the TAFE system has fallen apart and turned out to be a multi-million-dollar scam. It's all looking a bit sad. Oh, and have you heard of silicon welding? Apparently, some of the steel coming in from China, if you wanted a piece of steel that was a metre across and they only had half a metre pieces, they silicon weld them, and that's where you line the two pieces up side by side and you tack it together, and then you fill it in between the tack welds with no more gaps. That's called silicon welding. Apparently there's bridges in residential areas that have been made with silicon welded steel because it's so much cheaper to bring it in from China than it is to make steel in Australia. So that could be interesting. Industrialism is disappearing up its own arsehole, really. Not much anybody can do about it. Get used to the fact that everybody's going to be unemployed soon because there won't be any economy. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.